Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show. Now, for this week, by a user request, I'm going to be going over, albeit briefly, all the decks I've actually played competitively over the past year. It's a long list. So I'm not doing a full deck guide over all of them because it wouldn't make sense. Half of the cards are completely different. And yeah, it just wouldn't make sense. So what I'm going to be doing is just going through in a timeline, and I'll have sort of the class thing pop up like over there or somewhere over here or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so moving on to the first one on the list. This was the first deck I played competitively at all, which was a Shaman aggro deck, actually. Now, Shaman was always a class that I quite enjoyed, and at the beginning of the game there was things like 3/4 Cult Master. So I put 2 and 2 together and made an aggro deck which just swarmed the board, and you drop a Cult Master, you never run out of cards, and then you Bloodlust for the win. That was basically the entire deck. It worked pretty well for the metagame at the time with all the Cult Masters and things like that. I ended up getting top 4 with it in the first tournament I ever played. It was a really nice deck. Wasn't that strong in hindsight, but considering how no one knew anything about the game, it was pretty decent at the time. But besides that, there's not really much I can really say about the Shaman deck. Played it in one tournament, played it for a week or so, and it did pretty well. Now, from here I moved on to a Mage deck, which was when all the secrets came out. You see, all the secrets were spoiled at a later date, about 2 weeks after the rest of the cards were. So as soon as secrets came out, I just made a bunch of secret decks. I went through a bunch of different variations of it. Deck worked okay, played it in a couple of tournaments, did a couple of things with it, actually did a lot of playtesting with it. It was a pretty decent deck. Again, in hindsight wasn't as good, but still the freeze cards were really powerful back then, and it was a tier 2 deck I think at the time, but it was definitely okay. Now, at this point as well, I was testing around some Druid decks. Druid I didn't really go onto in terms of the bandwagon here because it was in talks that it was going to get banned in tournaments, so therefore it got soft banned in the Cockatrice community as well. If you play Druid, most people just leave the game. It was really that bad. So yeah, I didn't really play much of the Druid class, so I did want to actually test into that, but it was so broken you just felt dirty playing it. Now, the next class I really spent a long time with was Paladin. Now, Paladin was a extremely interesting class for me. I played a number of Paladin aggro decks, a number of Paladin control decks. I was playing Paladin control last July, I think. June or July? Yeah, I was playing Paladin control all the way back then with Lay on Hands, Guardian of Kings, all that stuff. And then the first person to actually do really well with it in a tournament, though, was a guy called Rhea, who didn't like Swiss tournaments, so when we switched to Swiss, he just left. It was kind of weird. Anyway, yeah, he did quite well with it in top 4, and this was I think 3 weeks after I'd been playing mine, so yeah, that was annoying for me because everyone credited him with the deck, which was irritating, but the actual Paladin deck I became known for, which I started playing later on in Alpha, but I played through most of this period, played Paladin a lot during late Alpha, was tokens. Now, the token list was metagame changing. It's the deck that I played that was the most metagame changing. Basically, it was a swarm deck that played 1/6 Imp Masters, 6 mana Stormwind Champions, 2/3 Knife Jugglers, just crazy stuff. The original version even had Flesh Eating Ghoul in it, which I took out fairly quickly afterwards, but it was good at the time. You get your 12 damage Flesh Eating Ghouls. But that was just sort of the fun part of the deck. But the actual competitive part of it was extremely powerful. It was an incredibly busted deck, and it was promptly nerfed into the ground by Blizzard about a week after the tournament that top forward. And just before the patch sort of went live, because remember we were playing with Cockatrice versions, so the patch went live and it would take like a day or something to update it, so we had a tournament to play. Now, the tournament recap for that week, I remember this, was top 8, 6 token decks. The deck was insanely overpowered. It wasn't just Paladin though, it was Shaman as well. Shaman with Bloodlust, Paladin with Divine Favor. Not any Druids, because Druid hadn't been unbanned yet. It was actually the patch that caused Druids to be unbanned. So it was just a bunch of token decks. It was quite funny. It was extremely funny. But pretty miserable to play against, I must admit. Now, after the nerf, I did optimize the deck heavily, and I actually made a deck tech on it. It's a really old deck tech. You can go looking for it if you like. But the actual deck did make it into beta. This was roughly when beta came out. Beta came out roughly a patch after this, but I played Paladin throughout most of that. I dabbled with a couple of decks here or there, you know, some Mage, Warlock, things like that. But I mainly focused on the Paladin. So now we're going to early beta, and I'm still playing tokens, and I get into 3-star Master with it because that's how the ladder system worked at the time. So I get to 3-star Master in about a day. It was literally that easy. You get into 3-star Master in about a day, or 2-star or whatever, and then I realized the Paladin deck wasn't that good. So, well, I mean, it was good, it just wasn't a tier 2, it was like a tier 2 deck. It was amazing when it went off. It's comparable to Shockedin, actually, now. If you got the Divine Favor at the right time, you just won, and if you didn't, you just lost. It was pretty miserable sometimes, but it just ran people over. So at this point, I was thinking, well, I need to make a new deck. So I went into Rogue. Now, Rogue was revealed to be quite overpowered because the rest of the overpowered stuff from Alpha had been nerfed. So Rogue was fairly broken. So moving into this, most people were playing Miracle and also some mid-rangey spell power decks. I was playing aggro spell power tempo thing. It was weird. There's another deck tech on that one if you go looking. But it was an aggro spell damage list, and it was really powerful. It was the deck I've performed up until recently. It was the deck I've performed best with. I got 3 second places with it in various mana grind tournaments. I got top 4 in MLG with something similar. It was just a crazy deck. It was a really, really crazy deck and was incredibly overpowered. Now, I never won with this deck. I've never won a tournament, actually. I've got 5 second places over various tournaments. I've never won a tournament. A bit of a fun fact there. But this deck did, in fact, take me to 3 of them. Now, one of the losses I got in the finals was against my teammate, Moon, who has come on several of my videos in the past. And he was playing a Mage deck that he was very, very well known for. In fact, it started being called it was Moon Mage aggro. So I did actually switch to this deck after Rogue was heavily nerfed. And I switched to the Moon Mage aggro deck, which was all the buff cards, 3/3 Shadowed Sun Clerics, 3/3 Defenders, Dark Iron, that was permanent, 8 mana Pyroblast, things like that. Just a really, really insane deck. It was another one of those overpowered decks. So we played with that for a while, and then the Frozen Giants deck was conceived by Doggy House, which ruined a metagame, and the nerfs came through. Now, the nerfs targeted all the buff minions. However, they completely forgot about Frozen Giants, which meant that the next 2 weeks of Hearthstone were extremely miserable. It was getting to the point where if you weren't playing Mage, not even Mage Control. It wasn't even like Mage Aggro didn't even work. It was just Mage Control. If you weren't playing Mage Control, you weren't getting anywhere. So that happened, and I was thinking, well, I might as well try some stuff. So I switched to Hunter for this particular time, played a Hunter Control deck, which Moon gave the name Huntoto, which was quite funny. So I was playing this Hunter deck for quite a while, and it was a very, very solid deck. I actually quite enjoyed playing it. I mean, Hunter is good against Mage, and it just didn't compete with the Mage decks. And at that point, I was starting to get frustrated with the game, and I took a long break from here. Just a random side note, by the way, there was a deck I played for 1 tournament, which was Argent Druid. This was actually a deck that was good for 1 weekend. It was basically a Druid deck that played everything with charge, including 2 Reckless Rocketeer, 2 Starfire, 2 Force of Nature, 2 Druid of the Claws that always were played in charge, never taunt, Argent Commanders, Fairy Dragons. It was such a gimmicky deck. But for that 1 weekend, everyone was playing slow, greedy decks. This was this was around just after the rogue nerf, actually. Everyone was playing slow, greedy decks. They're like, oh, we can get away with it now. So I ended up getting 3rd place in MLG with it, and then getting top 4 in 2 other tournaments on that weekend with Argent Druid. Made an article about it at some point. It went up on the Managround website, which disappeared once the website was taken down, which is unfortunate. But it was actually quite funny. It became an actual deck for a weekend. I ended up getting knocked out of one of the tournaments by an Argent Druid deck. It was really, really funny. But the deck really wasn't viable. It was just good for one weekend. It's one of those examples of a sort of a format breaker where it's just good for one weekend and then kind of dies off. It was very, very good for that one metagame and was a lot of fun to play. Now at this point I have a gap in my Hearthstone history because I took a roughly 4-month break to play other games like Soulforge and even like Magical Wizard Wars and Dota and things like that. So yeah, I took a long break, and then when I came back, same as the story started, playing Shaman. Now, this is where the decks become slightly more detailed because they're in more current patches. This Shaman deck was a Violet Teacher midrange deck, which is actually on Hearthstone. If I remember, I'll put the link in the description. Someone's probably gonna have to remind me in the comments because I always seem to forget. But yeah, there's actually a Violet Teacher midrange deck that I played on ladder to about rank 5 or so, and I played in limited, played in tournaments a decent amount, and that's what I came back with, and it was pretty fun. It was very, very slow. Very, very slow. It meant laddering with it was a pain in the neck. But the actual deck was very, very nice. I really enjoyed playing a Shaman again. It was a long time since I played a Shaman, and that mid-rangey style was a very, very interesting thing I could go through. I played Shaman mid-range on and off the entire Hearthstone, so sort of through my entire Hearthstone career because it was just a decent deck. So I just played Shaman mid-range along with all the other decks I mentioned throughout pretty much the entire of my Hearthstone history, and I really do enjoy playing Shaman from time to time. Not all the time. Sometimes it's miserable. Like at the moment in the current metagame, I do not like Shaman at all. It's just so vulnerable to burst. But the actual deck itself is fairly good, and it's usually tier 2 in pretty much every single metagame. It has been tier 1 a few times, but it's usually just tier 2 in every single metagame. And it's a nice deck to have in your arsenal. Now, moving on from here, onto the Rush Hunter. Now, Rush Hunter is a fully fledged deck tech that I did do. There is a video up that went up, like a month ago. So this Rush Hunter deck has changed over time though, so I need to put the updated list in the description, which is actually, it's arguably less or more powerful. It's just addressing some of the problems the actual deck has. And it's a really, really good deck. It's a lot more skill-based than people seem to give it credit for. It's definitely a lot more skill-based than something like Shockedin, for example. Like, tracking is the most skill-intensive card in the game, in my opinion. It's definitely the hardest card in the game to play. So I do think Hunter has a lot of merit to it. I haven't been playing Rush Hunter recently. I've been playing more mid-rangey variants, which I'll come back to in a little bit. But the Hunter list itself has changed a bit, so I'll put it in the description, and if you want to go see sort of my full breakdown on that list, just go over to my Hunter deck tech. This is going to be a long description now I think about it, but yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for the Hunter list. Now, the Druid list that I've been playing recently, this is the most successful deck I've ever played. Now, this is a ramp token list that it was originally token, but it switched to ramp token, which a teammate of mine, Crispy, designed and I helped playtest largely. It was mostly the two of us playing it. Birdie picked it up as well. There's a couple of us playing it now, but the actual deck is incredibly powerful. I played it at Zotac yesterday, and the deck total went 9-2. It just 2-0'd so many people. It was ridiculous. I ended up getting knocked out in top 16 in Zotac, but to a disconnect. It was really stupid. But the actual Druid list performed incredibly well, and it is definitely tournament viable. I mean, I've got most of my recent achievements have been with this deck. It's so powerful, and I'm actually going to do a deck tech video on it at some point. Maybe this week, maybe next week. I'm actually going to do a deck tech on it because I actually do think this deck is incredibly powerful and sort of should be put out there. But yeah, the Druid list is very, very good. If you want to see me playing it, I actually streamed for a decent amount yesterday. You can find the link to the stream in the description. And the last broadcast I did was mostly Druid. There was a couple hunter games in there, but it was mostly Druid, so you can go see that. And I'll do a deck tech, and I'll also put some example games into that, since I didn't in the last deck tech I did, and it was kind of awkward. But anyway, so that's the Druid. I'll do a full-fledged deck tech on that in the future. And concluding with the final deck is Reynad's Hunter list, and actually Reynad's Hunter list, as in 2 Stranglethorn, 2 Freezing, not the double Hyena. You can go find it on Hearthbone. Now, this list is incredibly powerful, this Sunshine Hunter list. I did not play Sunshine Hunter that much when it was really, really popular. I personally hated the deck, to play it at least. It's very, very difficult to play, and until, weirdly enough, I could not play that deck until I played Rush Hunter for 400 games, and then I just picked up Sunshine Hunter instantly, which is kind of hilarious. Mostly because of tracking. One thing you do get out of Rush Hunter is tracking, and also Winter Hero Power, and those are like half the massive amounts of decisions that embolden Sunshine Hunter. The other thing is the current deck is way less combo focused than the previous list. I actually thought that was a weakness in the previous Sunshine list, was the double Hyena, and so focused on Unleash that if you don't draw Unleash you just lost. It was so incredibly combo focused. I really didn't like that list personally. I thought the list was incredibly overrated and was not unbeatable. In fact, it had some very, very obvious weaknesses. Like Rush Hunter would crush Sunshine Hunter because it was so busy trying to combo you off that you just killed him. It was really, really overhyped as a deck, I do think. I mean, at the moment, I do think Miracle is, for some reason, some people seem to think Sunshine Hunter and Miracle were like the same in terms of how oppressive they are. That's not true. Sunshine Hunter did not change the entire metagame. It just removed shamans from the game, which is what's happened now. But Rogue literally has changed the entire metagame. Just look at all the burst damage combos, and it's pretty miserable right now. But anyway, back on topic, the Sunshine Hunter list is incredibly strong. The double Tiger and the double Freezing give you actually a decent matchup against Miracle. Miracle can't beat Freezing Trap. They just can't. If you keep killing their stuff so they can't attack the Freezing and pop it, they will never kill you. They literally can't kill you if you have a Freezing up for the entire game. It's ridiculous. And as soon as they realize it's freezing, they're just screwed. And they spend so many resources trying to pop it, and all you have to do is stop them from hitting you. If you stop them from hitting you, you just win. I mean, yeah, that's true for any deck. But if you stop them from hitting you with anything besides Leroy, you just win the game. It's pretty absurd. So Freezing just wins the game against Miracle most of the time. If you play 2, most people only play 1. So if you play 2 Freezing, then they just run smack into the second one. It's pretty funny. The Tigers, they can't interact with it. Tigers are actually very, very good in general. You play Tiger on turn 5, turn 6 you play Highmane, then you attack with the Tiger. They have to deal with the Highmane, which means you attack with the Tiger again, and that's like 10 damage from a 5-drop, which is extremely good. And it's a very, very underestimated 5-drop. I think that 5-drop is actually quite powerful, and it's definitely what people are going to notice more, especially in Hunter decks. I do love the Tiger. The rest of the deck is also pretty powerful as well. As I said, you can go look at Reynad's list. I'll put that in the description as well. As I said, this is going to be one hell of a long description. But anyway, that's about it. So the Druid list, I'll make a deck tech on. The rest of them, so the Shaman, Hunter, and I'll put the Druid one down there as well. So Shaman, Hunter, Druid, the Rush Hunter list, I'll put in the description, and also any of the videos I referenced to as well. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback or just ask any questions, put it in the comment section below. I do have a Twitter account now that I did open, so whenever I go live on stream, you'll get a tweet on that, and that'll probably be fairly infrequent, maybe once a week or something, or whenever I'm just playing tournaments. Yeah, whenever I'm playing tournaments, I'll stream. So if you follow me on Twitter, then you'll get a tweet whenever I do go live. So if you're interested in watching that stuff, head over there. I'll put the link in the description. Anyway, as for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.